Yo, yo, yo. Welcome to another episode of the Attic Podcast. I'm so glad that you guys can join me today. My name is Robertini De'Source, and of course, as you know by now, or maybe you don't, I am a music producer who also happens to like anime and music. I'm very excited to dive into today's episode. We're specifically going to be talking about sampling in general, what's so important about sampling, and how I go about my sampling process as a music producer. And am I going to actually sample stuff from anime and video games? Well, I can't wait to dive into this. So if you're looking forward to it,
This is
let's
from
hop
the
into it.
source, of course.
All right. That was the theme song to season one of this podcast. And if you're looking for that beat, you can actually stream it on the YouTube channel. Also, it's available on my website at www.iamdesource.com, and eventually it'll also be available on all streaming platforms later down the road. So, with that being said, let's hop into today's topic, which is sampling, right? So, let's start with the basics. What is sampling? Sampling is basically taking a piece of a different content and then kind of putting that into your own content and making your own melody or making your own sound from that. So, for example, right, let's just say if you were sampling something from The Lion King. The idea is maybe you want to take the Lion King theme song, right? And then you take that song, you take a piece of that song that you like, then you put it into your own creation, and you could modify it in a unique way, and then kind of put it together to make it into a whole completely new song. That's kind of the idea of sampling. I try to dumb it down as much as I can, and not out of disrespect, but more of, if you're listening to this, I want to give you guys a very basic description of what sampling is. Now, why is sampling super important? Well, I think sampling is important because, first and foremost, sampling is something that's been started since the birth of hip hop. Hip hop and sampling has always been a thing, and ever since, people and artists, musicians, rappers, they've always looked at DJs for basically taking original songs and doing cool scratches, and that's really where sampling came from. It's really, really cool, man. The idea that you can take an original song, either put a scratch over it or flip it in a way that sounds unique, is actually very, very cool, despite what a lot of people may say about it. So I'm not going to dig too much into the history of sampling, but if you are interested in that, I definitely suggest that you go and do some research on sampling, because it is a whole thing, man. And we got to give credit to those who really started that phenomenon, because sampling has become a huge part of hip hop culture, and you can even see it in today's music. There's sampling all over the place in today's music. So if sampling didn't exist, like half the songs that you guys love, especially in hip hop and any genre of music, honestly, would have not happened for sure. So we definitely should pay homage to that. So, sampled beats, right? Since we're on this topic of sampling and the importance of sampling, right? Sampled beats, that's like a huge deal within the music hip hop community, right? So a lot of us producers here, we make beats and we put samples, or we take samples from other songs, we put them on our beats, right? That's something that we always do. And I think sampled beats are really interesting because it forces the creator to really put him or herself in a position to be as creative as possible, because there's a couple things that could happen, right? When you're sampling a beat, right? What you're doing is you're taking an original song, you're putting it into your own project, you're listening to this song, and you're saying to yourself, okay, what can I do to make my song sound really unique, right? Now, there's a couple approaches. You can actually just take a melody from that song and kind of put your own drums and put your own element under that melody and make it something, and then maybe do some slight changes to the melody so it's not an exact copy. Or you can completely flip the entire melody of the song around so it completely sounds different from what you have ever heard before. Both methods do work really well, and there's nothing wrong with either or. Now, in terms of me, I do both, although I prefer actually taking the melody and completely flipping it and making it your own, only because one, it's more fun to do it that way, and it's definitely more challenging, and I like to challenge myself, right? So what's the challenge when it comes to actually putting samples together? Because when you're making a beat, obviously, and you're taking a sample, one, you have to be careful because you really don't want to copy the melody for obvious reasons. You know, if you're copying a melody, it's just basically saying, hey, I'm just taking the song idea and just redoing it again. That would be, I would say, more of a remix. And a remix is kind of a whole nother thing, because when you're sampling a beat, you're not actually doing a remix, you're actually creating your own original idea. So let's make sure that we understand the difference. A remix is when you take an original song, you take the same melody, and you actually just basically put your own little twist to it, which is what I mentioned before, right? So really what I said before when it comes to that kind of sampling is more of a remix. The other kind of sampling is where you actually take the melody, or you take an element from that song and you flip it and make it your own. A lot of cool stuff that goes on when it comes to that. So for me, when I'm making beats, whenever I'm sampling, I look at, okay, what part of the song do I think is going to be the most interesting for me to flip? And I feel like a lot of other producers probably think the same way, right? So, for example, I know I mentioned Lion King, but let's go into another direction. Let's actually keep it, something more familiar that maybe a lot of other people know. Or you know what? Let's even go anime for a second. How about that? Let's just say I want to sample something from an anime called Naruto. I'm sure you anime fans may know about Naruto, right? A lot of great music in Naruto. I can take an original song, let's just say the theme song from the original Naruto, and I import it into the program that I'm using, and I can say, okay, what part of the melody am I going to take, right? So the first thing that I do, and this is from my perspective, is that I would sit down and I would just listen to the song about 4 to 5 times in a row, right? Listening to the song, and I'm like, okay, I like this part. Then all of a sudden, when I find that part, I'm saying, okay, I like this part. I'm going to take that part, and we're going to do something that's called chopping, which is basically where you take the actual sound and you cut an actual part of that sound of what you like from the audio. Now, when you do that, you're only getting the part that you want to use for your sample. Once you do that, that's when you can go and start manipulating it. And there's a lot of different ways in which you can manipulate the sound to make it your own. Now, of course, I don't want to get too super technical for you guys, but maybe I might dive or dig deep a little bit more into a more technical aspect of sampling, maybe in another episode. But I will say this, there are definitely a couple things that we like to do. For example, we like to change the pitch. Changing the pitch is pretty simple. Changing the pitch is basically when you take the sound of where it's at right now, and you can either lower it or you can make it higher. So, for example, the way that I'm talking would be the original pitch of the sound, let's just say, right? Now, let's say if I wanted to do a sample of my voice, but I want it to be lower, what I would do is actually turn the actual sound of my voice lower. So I'm going to actually be funny here for a second and show you guys exactly what I mean. You hear me talking normally, right?
So now if I started talking like this is what my voice
Would
would
sound
sound.
like obviously I'm manipulating my voice, but that's what my voice would sound like. Of course, I can also go high pitch, so I can be like,
Hey, this is my voice now. This is what I'm going to sound like, etc., etc.
that's kind of the idea. Now, that's a very funny way of kind of explaining that to you guys. But I think you guys get the point. Um, maybe what I could have done was maybe press a button on my computer and actually show you the pitch change live, but I forgot to actually do that. But yeah, that's one way to actually alter a sample. Another way is basically you can actually reverse it. So usually you play a song, normal speed, that's fine. What you can do is play the song or play that sample, but play it backwards. And then it's a completely different sounding sample. So that's really cool as well. Of course, you can also make it go faster. You can also make it go slower. So that's another thing that you can do. And then of course you can add other cool effects to really give it its uniqueness. For example, you can distort the sound if you want, or you can give the sound some sort of reverb. Basically, it allows for more space for the sound to be really heard within your music. So there's a lot of cool things that you can really do when it comes to sampling. And also, you can also chop up different parts of the sample and kind of replay it over and over again to give it a rhythmic feel. So that's kind of another way to really get into sampling, right? I know I'm giving kind of just a general breakdown of how sampling works, but the reason why is because there's a whole art to sampling, and there's a lot of producers who are 20 times better than I am. One, in explaining what sampling is, but two, also in understanding on how to sample and how it works. But I wanted you guys who are just general fans of music, even if you're music producers and who know sampling, I just wanted to give you guys just a basic understanding of how sampling works. It's really cool. You can do so much with the music, and I think that it does not get enough credit on how amazing it is to be able to take a piece of work and turn that into a completely different kind of song. So I'm here to just give credit to all of those who really do a lot of great sampling on their music. However, there is one issue here. And I think a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about. And this is with anything. This is very related to even copywriting, specifically on YouTube, of course, too, right? Well, there's a lot of copyright strikes on YouTube. There's a lot of copyright strikes when it comes to music. And guess what? That's the issue. When you are sampling music, you have to be very aware of the fact that you are taking somebody else's work, and you have to make sure that you either let them know that you're using this for just entertainment purposes, or you want to make money off of that, but you have to ask for permission. And that's where the trick where it gets really tricky, right? So the issue with all of this is it's always a big deal whenever you're trying to sample something, which is why a lot of people are against sampling. The problem is you can take a sample of a song, especially when it's a very popular song, right? And let's just say you make a really dope beat, someone ends up singing over the song, and the song becomes popular. All of a sudden, the original creator of that sample may have heard something that sounded familiar in their melody, and then all of a sudden they could be like, hey, you just use my content for your own gain. No, I'm not going to let that happen. You, my friend, are going to get sued for that. And that's usually how the whole legal thing ends up becoming. So it's very common. So what I wanted to really point out was that when you're sampling beats, you just have to be very careful. And don't be afraid to sample, of course, right? If you're a producer, right? Or if you know someone who's getting into sampling, like, don't be afraid to sample. It's completely okay to do it. But just one, ask for permission, or two, just make it very clear that you're not trying to make profit off of it, and maybe at some point, if your song or the music that that you are using, and if it gets really popular, then you know what? Maybe then later on you can ask for permission and then be like, okay, I would like to ask for permission so maybe I can profit off of this music, or I would like to ask permission so that I can actually use this for whatever project that you're working on. It's very very important that you are aware of this. I think a lot of producers, especially on the come up, and including myself, like, we're sampling things and we're just so afraid of the legal stuff, and it's gonna happen. Like, there's going to be you're never going to be able to get away from it. Someone's going to put a claim on the sample that you're using, but you're never gonna know until you actually sample music. But I want to also stress the importance that you should always, 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 always continue to sample, because I believe that sampling continues to help you be more innovative in your creative process. I truly believe that. I think it's super, super important. Of course, it's also important to be original in your creation, but for me, I know that when you are sampling, like, it really forces you to really get creative because you're already using original content, right? So how can you take that content and make it unique in your own? And that's a really, really, really cool challenge. So as a matter of fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we're going to also talk about how you can manipulate sampling from original work and even just specific sounds so it's so unfamiliar you don't even recognize that it's from that original content. Of course, before we do that though, I'm going to show you guys just a quick beat and then we will hop right into it. So with that being said, let's play this real quick and I'll see you on the other side. Alright, we're back. I hope you guys really liked that beat. That beat is available on my website. Once again, it's at www.iamdesource.com. And what's interesting is that this beat is perfect for today's topic because guess what? It's a beat that I put a sample to. Yes. So, can you guess what the sample came from? Let's wait 2 seconds. Okay, just kidding. But anyway, so if you are a video game fan, some of you may recognize that sample as coming from one of my favorite video game series of all time, and that is Kingdom Hearts. Specifically, that sample came from Kingdom Hearts 2. Kingdom Hearts is a video game series that's been out since 2001 or 2002. Loved it when I was a kid. The most recent game came out, and it was cool to see the journey of the entire game. But of course, I'm not here to talk about that game. Whether you guys know about that game or not is not the point. But what I want you guys to take is to understand that that beat came from an original song from a video game. And that is what sampling is all about, right? So I'm going to do a full breakdown of this beat in a future video. It's going to be very cool, but let's talk a little bit about it just as a sneak preview. Basically, that sample came from a battle in Kingdom Hearts that always happens when you're fighting a specific kind of enemy. Those enemies are called nobodies. There's a theme song that plays every time you face those kind of creatures, right? With that being said, I thought that original battle theme was really cool. See, this is what I'm talking about, guys. If you're really paying attention, this is kind of my thought process. I thought that theme was really cool, so I said, let me see if I can take a sample from that because I love the game a lot. So here I am, I go and I sit down, I listen to that theme, and I'm like, okay, what can I do? Well, guess what? I changed the pitch, and I did a reverse effect on it as well. And then after that, I took the original melody and let it rock, but with another pitch change. Those are the three things that I did with that sample. Of course, I added my own drums and everything else under it. Very, very cool. I did a lot of cool chopping stuff. So, like I talked about earlier in this episode, some of the techniques that I talked about I actually used in that sample, and it was really really fun to do, and I really think that turned out really fun. And guess what? That beat really pushed me a little bit because I was forcing myself to figure out a way how can I make this beat sound really hard, but at the same time I wanted to be creative and unique. So that's kind of just a very basic breakdown. Of course, in a future video that will definitely be announced, I will definitely do a full breakdown of that sample. As a matter of fact, if you're on Patreon, for my patrons, most likely you guys will get that video first. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But moving forward, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the concept of taking a sample and chopping up unique specific sounds as well in order for you to make your own song out of that, right? So, of course, we talked about sampling music, we talked about how you can take specific melodies and all of that. But sampling this does not stop from there, right? You can also sample sounds from TV shows. You can sample sounds from video games, as I mentioned, sounds from just everyday life experiences. That's what makes sampling so cool, you guys, right? So, for example, let's just say you're in the kitchen, right? You're cooking, you're making some spaghetti, you turn on the heat. All of a sudden the heat's a little too high and you hear that little beeping noise that sometimes that it does when you turn the stove on, like when the fire's too high. That's something you can sample, right? Or even the sound of the boiling water. You can sample something like that. You can even sample something where you have the strand of spaghetti in the box and you shake it. Guess what? That makes its own unique sound. If you have like even a phone or even a microphone near you, you could sample that. My point is, you can basically take any sound from anything in the world and you can actually put that in your own creation. That's what makes sampling so cool. That's why I believe sampling is so important, because it forces you to be creative, but more importantly, it gets your juices flowing and you just become an overall better creator. Because sometimes eventually when you make a beat where you're not really taking samples, where you're actually taking sounds that are already imported into your program, or if you're learning how to play the keys, guess what? Just that creativeness in your mind is going to help you just overall make better beats. That's why I truly believe that sampling is so fun. It's so cool. I could definitely say that. And for example, right now, I'm going to relate this to anime because I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But I'm watching One Piece right now, and I just got to a very cool part in the show. I don't want to spoil, just in case if you are listening to this and you never heard of One Piece before. That's completely fine. It's an anime. It's pretty cool. Let's put it this way. If you understand what I'm talking about, I got to episode 726 and something really major happens in that episode. And in that episode, there's these really cool sound effects that is associated with that specific thing that happened. Well, guess what? I'm already inspired to make a beat using those sound effects. And this is what I was talking about before. It's like, at the end of the day, I love watching anime. I love playing games. I love being able to be influenced by these things because it helps me to inspire to make a beat. I can't wait to get into that because those sound effects are going to help me create a completely unique sounding beat. It's really, really cool, guys. And this goes with anything. If you want to take a sample of a car horn, right? You could literally sit in your car, take your iPhone, take your Android phone, take any smartphone. Most phones nowadays, they have some sort of recorder of some sort, or some sort of microphone, right? Just go in your car, beep your horn a couple times. Take that phone, record the sound, come back, and you can import the sound into your program, and that's, guess what, you have a real life car horn that you can use to create a beat. That's what makes sampling so awesome, right? And there's a lot of other ways in which you can record sounds, obviously. I mean, the professionals, what they like to do is they'd go really in when it comes to actually sampling different kind of sounds. Sometimes they'll take different microphones and they have, soundproofs, and they have different kinds of microphones depending on what kind of sound that they're looking for. They go really deep. But for people who maybe don't have that kind of setup, in order for them to do that, a phone is just perfectly fine. It really is. If you have a microphone, you want to use that, you can as well. On top of that, let's just say that you're watching a television show, right? It doesn't even have to be anime. You could be watching something as, let's see, what's a good television show, you guys? Let's just say, let's do a classic, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? Watching that show, you might like something that happened in that show with the cool sound. You might want to take a sample of that, right? And this is where you got to be careful with the copywriting, but you can use that sample. All you got to do is, there's a way where you can actually record the sound from the video that you're playing, put that into your computer or into your program, and once again, there you go. You have the sound. And there's a lot of producers who do stuff like this. There is one producer out right now, man. He is killing it with that kind of style of sampling. And if I'm not mistaken, his name is iMarkkeys. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but basically I noticed a lot of his videos on social media and stuff like that. And he's really famous for taking real life sounds and real life videos and turning them into amazing beats. It is unbelievable. One of the most famous ones out right now, and it's funny, of course, even though it shouldn't be a joke, but the whole coronavirus situation. So I'm sure a lot of you guys may have heard about this, but Cardi B basically put out a video like about a month back, basically saying how the coronavirus is a serious thing. We all know how Cardi B is with her antics. So, with that being said, it was funny just to listen to her speak on that. But what he did was, he took that video, he took the original audio of her talking about the coronavirus, and he did a complete remix, or a complete remix to that. He literally took a part of that video where she talks about coronavirus and how it's getting real, and then he made a whole beat to it. I think you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's been all over social media, memes on that everywhere. It was amazing. And this is just a great example of how you can take a real life sound and turn it into a beat, man. So that's why I always say sampling is something that I believe that every producer should at least try to keep their creative juices flowing, because it is so much fun. So, of course, now the question is, I kind of already basically told you guys, but am I going to actually be sampling anime and video games? Well, guess what? You guys already know what my answer is to that. The answer is absolutely yes. I already sampled the Kingdom Hearts beat before, right? And I have a lot of ideas to actually sample other anime, especially the animes that I am watching for the anime reaction. So that's going to be very fun. I'm also kind of going online, searching kind of some ideas, because I noticed there's a lot of producers who are also taking some anime samples, and it's very cool to see that, which is amazing. But if you guys are wondering if I'm going to be sampling anime and video games, absolutely yes. That is something that I'm looking forward to. It's going to be very fun. Anytime I hear a sound that I like in the game, or in the anime, I'm going to have my phone ready, or I'm going to be able to record it on my computer. There's a lot of other ways that I can do that. I will let you guys know maybe in a separate video, or on a separate episode, or maybe only for my patrons. I'll tell you exactly how I specifically take the sounds besides recording from my phone, but that's for another time. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be getting into that. As a matter of fact, most recently, one of my favorite games as well, when it comes to, music, well, not even just music, but just a game when it comes to sounds in general, is this game called Crash Bandicoot. I played Crash Bandicoot since I was a kid, since what the PlayStation was out. Um, so with Crash Bandicoot being an interesting option for me right now, one of the sounds that the character does. Well, first and foremost, if you guys don't know what Crash Bandicoot is, it's a very basic game where you basically take an animal, it's called a bandicoot, and he basically goes on an adventure to basically stop the bad guys and goes through a bunch of like mazes, basically. That's like a very basic breakdown of the game. It sounds simple because it really is. But pretty much, there's a sound that he makes, and he goes, "Whoa!" That's the sound that he makes. With that being said, I'm thinking about taking a sample of that and turning that into something. So that's just an idea. Obviously, I already mentioned about the anime that I'm watching and how I'm going to turn that and use sounds from that as well. And of course, there are other ideas that I have in mind because I'm also been playing a lot of racing games. In particular, I've been playing a lot of Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo is a racing game that I play all the time. For those of you guys who don't know, this is something you're learning, but I actually really love racing games. But I'm going to be actually taking some sounds from that as well and possibly sampling that. So that's going to be something I'm going to be doing later down the road. I don't know if I'm going to do car noises yet or if I'm going to do something else, but those are just ideas. Once again, it's all about getting the creative juices flowing. It's all about getting ideas down. I may take these sounds and I may sample them and I may not like them. I'll be like, you know what? I don't even want to make these samples. But guess what? Because I did that, I got my creative juices flowing. So now I can just make a beat out of scratch with some ideas. That's the beauty of sampling. And that's why, as I'm going to say again, I really enjoy the process of sampling. And I also believe that a lot of producers should continue to sample because it's just going to make you that much of a better producer. Because when it's time for you to make an original piece of content, you have so much influence from all the sounds that you make around you that it's just going to be easy for you to make whatever style of music that you're working on. So that's basically how I really wanted to kind of break down just the concept of sampling for you guys. We could talk about sampling in a much, much more deeper way. For sure, because there's so much to it and there's so much respect that we have to pay to the OGs who really paved the way for us. But we will save that for another time. So with that being said, y'all, I hope that you guys really enjoyed this podcast episode. It was very fun to talk about sampling. I hope you guys really truly did enjoy that. And more importantly, I'm just very excited to continue to make music. Also, I'm very excited to show you guys some of the music that I'm going to be making. And I'm also excited to know if there are any other producers or musicians who are also sampling, and specifically, are they sampling things like anime, sampling things like games. So if you're watching this, definitely hit me up. Or if you're just listening to this and you're just curious about just sampling from different stuff, definitely like hit me up and we could definitely talk about, my process in terms of me putting some samples together. Of course, if you're on the YouTube channel, if you happen to be watching this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button, and hit the like so you know when I drop a video. New podcast episodes drop every week on YouTube. But guess what? If you're looking for the podcast episodes early, you can get new podcast episodes, get early access if you go on over to the Patreon page. You get access to this podcast about 2 episodes or 2 weeks before it actually goes out on public. So that's pretty cool. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Of course, you guys already know I also have beats on my website. There's also beats on YouTube as well. So I do not want to keep you guys. I know you guys have a lot of important things to do, so let me not take up your time. So once again, I really hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. And of course, don't let anybody ever tell you who you can or cannot be. And until the next episode, I will talk to you. My name is Robertini De'Source, and I am out.
This is from the source, of course.